Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Jelka.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Commissioner Peck.
Here.
Commissioner Perney.
Here.
Commissioner Vanier.
Here.
I'd like to invite everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on today's agenda is a citizens forum, a time set aside for any citizens who would like to bring to the Commission's attention a matter that is not on the day's official agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward for that reason? Seeing none, we will continue on with, there are no awards and proclamations today or public hearings, so we will continue with the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of October 22nd, 2007. Item 6.2, resolution number 076444, authorizing a memorandum of understanding regarding the use of city fire hydrants by rural fire departments for firefighting operations. Item 6.3, authorize the purchase of 4 Panasonic Tough Books from CDWG in the amount of $17,483. Item 6.4, authorize the sole source purchase of a crime site imager in the amount of $24,933. Item 6.5, authorize the addition of a truck and animal box for the animal shelter to the 2007 Vehicles and Equipment Program. Item 6.6, amend the 2007 Planning Sub-CIP to include $80,000 for multi-use trail concept design services and authorize distribution of a request for proposal.
Any questions on any items on the consent agenda? I have one. I'm sorry. Do you, okay. I have one. Item 6.4, the purchase of the crime site imager. Is there a local match at all with that grant, or is that entirely a grant fund purchase?
No, sir, it's fully funded.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Motion is to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0. There is no development business today, so we will continue with items of administration.
Item 8.1, first reading ordinance number 07-10419, amending Chapter 8 of the Salina Code by repealing Articles 10 through 15.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Simply put, as the staff report indicated, this is a simple housekeeping item to correct an oversight in our most current rewrite of Chapter 8. We recently identified that the previous ordinance failed to strike parts of the original language, notably Articles 10 through 15, and replace it with the proposed revisions in which those articles were not included. Consequently, the current code technically and unintentionally contains the old sections. The information and requirements in these articles have been either eliminated or merged into preceding articles in the chapter, have therefore become redundant or obsolete. We did a very significant streamlining of Chapter 8 when we wrote it a couple of years ago, reducing it from 15 articles to 7 that actually contain provisions with a couple of extra reserved articles. So this simply does repeal those previous last 5 articles that are no longer applicable. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding this.
Any questions, Mr. Roberts? Thank you very much. Any public comment? Commission action?
Mayor, I'd move for approval of ordinance 07-10419 on first reading.
Second.
Motion is to approve ordinance 07-10419, amending Chapter 8 of the Salina Code by repealing Articles 10 through 15. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Item 8.2, first reading ordinance number 07-10420, amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 1 of the Salina Code by adding Section 8-14.1, providing for the local amendment to the International Building Code, Section 1204.1, pertaining to space heating requirements for interior environments.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular section of the IBC that we're looking at revising contains a provision that all new buildings and additions intended for human occupancy must be provided with an active or passive space heating system capable of maintaining the indoor air temperature at 68 degrees on a design heating day. The exception is for those spaces whose primary function is not related to human comfort. Several of the other previous model building codes, including the uniform code that we had adopted previously here in the city, did have mandatory heating requirements for some occupancies, including residential, educational, and institutional uses, institutional being like hospitals, jails. However, the language in the current adopted code requires that any space that's intended for human occupancy must be provided with this active or passive space heating system. Therefore, the provisions would apply to all occupancies other than those that are specifically not intended for human occupancy, such as equipment areas or warehouses that are not distribution centers, where the employees would otherwise normally be expected to be working. The commentary to the building code explains that the exception was included to recognize that there are some types of uses that will be occupied by humans that cannot practically meet this requirement because the nature of the process that occur in that space, for example, refrigerated distribution warehouses, could not meet this requirement, nor could hospital operating rooms or some manufacturing operations that must be kept cool due to the products or materials used in the manufacturing process. We've received stakeholder feedback that requiring manufacturing facilities or distribution warehouses to be heated for the comfort of the employees is unreasonable, and the exception should be much more broadly applied. Some stakeholders felt that the heating the workspace is an employee benefit and should be left up to the owner to determine if that is a benefit they wish to provide instead of making it mandatory in the code. They further argue that in most cases, the owner will voluntarily provide some minimum amount of heat in order to maintain productivity. In keeping with our commitment to service quality, we had committed to proactively identifying recurring code concerns and initiating Building Advisory Board and City Commission consideration, regardless of whether an applicant, designer, etc., chooses to make such a request. The Building Advisory Board, and consequently that's what happened in this case, we brought this to the Building Advisory Board initiated by staff and not by any single person or business. We brought this to the Building Advisory Board and asked them, and they considered this question at their October meeting. Their consensus was that they agreed with staff's interpretation and application of the requirement as adopted, but there was vigorous debate regarding the basic need to codify such a requirement at all. Their final conclusion was that there was a need for the requirement in most occupancies, but that the cost benefit for adding heat in large manufacturing warehouse facilities should be a decision that's left to the building owner. Therefore, the board voted to recommend modifying the exception to add the language to the exception that warehouses and manufacturing facilities and such other similar uses would not be required to provide the mandatory heating system. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the board's recommendation at this time.
Any questions, Mr. Roberts? Thank you very much. I'd entertain any public comment if there is any. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Commission.
Mayor, I'd move we pass ordinance number 07-10420 on first reading.
Second.
Motion is to approve ordinance 07-10420, which adds to the Salina Code and a local amendment pertaining to space heating requirements for interior environments to the building code. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Item 8.3, first reading ordinance number 07-10421, levying Salina Business Improvement District Number 1 service fees for 2008.
Mr. Gage?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. State laws dictate the formation and operation of what we call business improvement districts for cities.
The City of Salina has one, now referred to as the Lee District. The concept of self-governance for downtown has continued over the last 23 years in Salina. The city provides the BID services through employees or by contract with a not-for-profit. In our case, most of the services are provided through the Salina Downtown Inc. organization, and they have been since 1987. That's that time of year where we, by ordinance, where we ask the City Commission to establish the service fees for the Business Improvement District. The annual fees are mandatory payments. They're established by the city by ordinance. As a City of Salina fee, it's billed and collected by our finance department with the assistance of the SDI staff, and they actually provide a lot of legwork and assistance for that. What they're recommending for this year is the same fee that we've had in previous years, so there's no recommended increase in the service fees for downtown for 2008. I say this year, it's for 2008. The budget from SDI was provided to the city in May, and it basically delineates their expenditures for various downtown functions. It's separated by various functions. It's basically guided by the Puma Master Plan and by the strategic planning that sort of spun off from that happens with SDI. Given that there is no change and that basically the program of services is very similar in past years, staff recommends the Commission approve the ordinance provided for establishment of the service fees for 2008. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and I believe Phil Kleiman is also here, is available.
Questions of staff or of Ms. Klima? Thank you for that report. I'd entertain any additional public comment if there is any. Being none, I'll bring it back to the Commission.
Mayor, I'd move that ordinance number 07-10421 be approved on first reading.
Second.
Motion is to approve ordinance 07-10421 levying Salina Business Improvement District number 1 service fees for 2008. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. That passes 5-0.
Item 8.4, Resolution Number 076445, amending Resolution Number 076432, providing for the advisability and authorizing sanitary sewer improvements in the 1700 block of Glen Avenue.
Ms. Tasker?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. In September, the City Commission approved a resolution of advisability and authorization establishing the special assessment improvement districts for the 1700 block of Glen Avenue. Since that time, we've been through a lot of different discussion amongst the property owners and city staff and bond council on this project. So I'm going to try to just hit the highlights from those events. In general, after the project was designed, we talked further with bond council about this property, 309 Channel Road. In discussion with them, we found that the location of their private sewer was such they would be better to connect to an existing public sewer in Channel Road, and that they should not be a part of this benefit district. As a result of that, we've amended the benefit district to include these 4 properties there and not 309 Channel Ridge Road. And as a result of that, bond council also recommended that 80% of the costs be assessed to the benefit district, with the 20% of the costs being paid by the city at large. We also had a public meeting with all of the benefit district property owners to discuss the sewer location, project costs, easement requirements, and schedules. At this particular meeting, all 4 of the property owners were there, and we were able to determine that the furthest property to the east had a private sewer line that crossed the property to the west, and that it was in good condition and fairly new, and that they had an easement to cross the property to the west. And at that time, we determined we could shorten the overall project, the public sewer portion, approximately 170 feet, and begin the public sewer at this location as opposed to back at the property to the east. So the overall project was reduced in length of pipe from approximately 600 feet to 430 feet. We then proceeded with a bid letting, and we received 2 bids on Tuesday, October 9th, one being from Stevens Contractors, LLC, in the amount of $58,735. The second from Smoky Hill LLC in the amount of $70,135. The engineer's estimate was $44,933.50. We found that the unit prices for these bids varied greatly amongst the bidders. The two bids received that day indicate at least the market price for that particular day was much higher than our engineer's estimate. So at that point, due to the fact that we'd reduced the overall project in scope and that the engineer's estimate was exceeded, we spoke with bond counsel about our options, and they recommended that we amend the petition and the resolution, which is what's in your packet today. So as a result of that, we met with the property owners in that area to discuss the increased cost, to see what their opinion was and where they felt they wanted to be on that project. At the end of that meeting, they all agreed that they wanted to move forward with the project as is. And in general, the cost was approximately $800 more per property owner. In general, the property owners within this benefit district would be assessed 80% of the cost, with the remaining 20% to the city at large. The total estimated cost for the improvements is $70,482, or $14,096 per parcel for the 4 property owners. Staff recommends that the City Commission adopt Resolution Number 076445, amending Resolution Number 076432, and as the second action, award the contract for the Glen Avenue sanitary sewer improvements to Stevens Contractors, LLC, in the amount of $58,735. Be glad to answer any questions you might have.
When we just, excuse me.
Go ahead.
When we discussed this before, I don't recall the city having a 20% share.
That's correct. It was all 5 property owners. The property 309 Channel Road.
Right.
Since that time, we have determined they have a better option to connect into a public sewer that's located in Channel Road based on their sewer location, and that would be that particular property owner's desire to make that connection as opposed to the new public line on the northern portion of their property.
Well, then, I still don't understand then why we're going to have a 20% city share.
For basically this portion of the line at large has no benefit to this particular property, and as a
But it does, but the other properties won't work without it.
that would be correct.
So we could just assess them.
Basically, we discussed it amongst staff and determined it was in our best benefit to help the project move forward that the city pick up a portion of this project. Otherwise, it is a fairly expensive project already for the property owners, and that section of line provided no benefit to, other than they need it to connect together.
Right.
Martha, correct me if I'm wrong, but in discussing it with bond counsel as well, knowing the configuration, their recommendation was that that be attributed to city at large rather than redistributed among the remaining property owners.
That would be correct. That was bond counsel's discussion, and it was, we had probably a half dozen conversations with them trying to ensure that they understood where the line was and all of the situation, and that was their recommendation, and we followed that recommendation.
Wait, what was their rationale?
I think in terms of applying city at large, we looked to them to determine the benefit that should be assigned to the adjoining properties, and so it's not uncommon for a special assessment for a portion of it to be benefit at large, or city at large benefit. In this particular instance, I think it's just that it was off-site, outside of the contiguous area of the benefiting property.
But it was most definitely several conversations between staff and our bond counsel and engineering department determining what direction to go. And from the initial discussion with them, we thought we had clearly defined where the sewer line was and that they were on track with the 100%. But as we went back and clarified the entire discussion and the cost of the project, that was their recommendation. And I think Mike best defines their logic as we understood it as we spoke with them.
Additional questions, Ms. Tasker? Thank you very much. I would entertain any public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to commission. Greg, am I understanding correctly, we need a motion for the resolution, another one to award the contract?
I think that would be best, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd move for adoption of Resolution 076445, amending Resolution number 076432.
Second.
Motion is to adopt Resolution 07-6445, providing for the advisability and authorizing sanitary sewer improvements in the 1700 block of Glen Avenue. Project number 07-2659. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
That passes 4-1 with Perney dissenting.
I think it's,
And now I need a-
Mayor, I would move we award contract for the Glen Avenue sanitary sewer improvements to Stephen Contractors LLC in the amount of $58,735.
Second.
Motion is to approve contract for the said project 07-2659 to Stevens Contractors in the amount of $58,735. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Item 8.5, resolution number 076446, 076447, 076448, and 076449, authorize items related to the potential retail development of property at South 9th Street and Key Streets.
Mr. Gage?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. What I'll try to do is summarize this and go through a description of the project itself and then get into the action items that you have. First, the project itself. It's a proposed retail development project on South 9th and Key Streets. Is intended to anchor a Kohl's family clothing store. We have 68,000 square feet. The actual number is 63,000 square foot store. In addition to that, there'd be 4 other retail development sites. One would accommodate an approximately 20,000 square foot I'd call it like a sub-anchor or secondary anchor store, and then 3 other sites that would range. One is about 6,000 square feet, and the others would range from about 1,800 to 3,000. The project is being proposed by Classic Real Estate from Wichita. It's a company that was founded in 1981 and has a pretty good experience with these types of projects. When we look at this project with all building and land improvements and full site development, it's approximately a $12 million investment in the property with the anticipated sales of, again, all sites developed, we estimate to be upwards of $18 million. That number is not what we put into our projections, just to let you know that, and I'll get back into that part a little bit later. The site is almost 11 acres. It's very flat, as most of Salina. It has been undeveloped for many years, while properties around it have developed. And we think one reason for that is its location within the 100-year floodplain. If you take a look at the picture that's provided over on the wall, all the darker area is a 100-year floodplain. And so that provides a pretty good picture of that site and the difficulty with development as a result of the floodplain. Most of the utilities are located adjacent to the site. There will probably have to be some limited off-site utility improvements for this site. Relating to the incentives, which seems to be the big aspect of this, the local incentive proposed is the issuance of $3 million in full faith and credit bonds. We'll refer to them as TIF bonds, to be repaid by tax increment financing through the designated redevelopment district. So that would be established as a redevelopment district, and using the TIF mechanism, which is provided by statutes, the cost of certain site improvements would be funded through revenues generated by the development on the site. And I do want to be very clear on this, because the structure of this is the financing of the project through the new property and sales taxes generated only by the redevelopment. Certainly, this presumes that the estimates and projections for this project come to fruition, and we believe that they will come to fruition. In addition, because it's a tax increment finance district and involves both sales and property taxes, our other local property taxing and sales taxing entities are also funding partners, and we have been in contact with those entities and have worked diligently to keep them up to date, and will continue to do so through the process. Again, to restate, the TIF incentive is $3 million. The period is over a period of 20 years. And to kind of hit how this works is what happens is you have a piece of property today that has a certain value, undeveloped, in a floodplain, and that value generates a certain level of taxes. Obviously no sales taxes because there are no sales from the property. Very limited amount of property taxes. You put a $12 million investment into the property. In addition, you generate sales taxes. So what happens, the $12 million in the site and building investment generates property taxes. And again, the sales taxes from those retail sales structures provides that type of tax. And what happens is that money is eligible to go back into the project for necessary site improvements. And when we looked at this, all the assumptions, all the financial assumptions are related only to the Coles project, not to any future development. We wanted to take a very conservative approach relating to that and not make assumptions about future development. Also, they're based on what we believe are fairly conservative sales numbers, not considered what we would believe to be the higher end sales, but a very conservative number. So, in essence, again, the intent of this is to take taxes that are generated from the site and put them back into the site for eligible expenses that are provided for by Kansas statutes. So I want to make that real clear. And again, on the assumption that all the financial assumptions in the future are met, there would be no other property or sales taxes generated from anywhere in the community put into this project. I think that's real important. I'll go through, real quick, the TIF process. I'm not going to go through every little step here. I think it lays it out. But in essence, there's really a few things that need to happen. The statutory process basically deals with two main issues. One's the establishment of the retail development site, and then the other's the district, and another is the retail development or the redevelopment plan. And so the first few actions you have will deal more with the site, and then later on, as time goes on, you'll deal with the plan. But we have 4 actions on today's agenda. One is a resolution establishing the redevelopment site as an eligible area for related incentives. There are 4 primary ways you can do that. But if it's in a floodplain like this site is, that meets the criteria. So this site is eligible by virtue of it being in a floodplain. So there are other ways. If you're not in a floodplain, there are a lot of other criteria, but the floodplain in and of itself makes this site eligible. And so that resolution establishes that. There's another resolution that basically establishes your intent to consider the establishment of a redevelopment district. It provides notice, in essence. The notice can be as soon as 30 days or as far out as 60 days. Our objective to keep the project on schedule is to try to hit that in approximately 30 days. What will happen later, you will have an ordinance in front of you establishing this redevelopment district approximately 30 days from now, and you'll have that as a formal action at that time. The other 2 actions we have today, one is authorize a funding agreement with the developer. What that does is it will provide a reimbursement back for certain costs out of pocket that the city would incur as a result of utilizing special legal counsel or a special financial review, whatever those might be. In the project, so that we don't actually have cost out of pocket as a result of processing this and reviewing the assumptions of this project. The 4th action would be to go ahead and engage then the special legal counsel, which is Gilmore and Bell. They're a bond counsel and they would serve as special legal counsel. They've been very helpful to date on helping us to structure this whole thing. Those are the 4 action items that you'll have today. In the future, there will be multiple public hearings. Again, within approximately 30 days, you'll have a redevelopment ordinance or a redevelopment district ordinance to establish that district. We will have a redevelopment agreement because there's some other assumptions that we're negotiating as far as the city's role and the developer's role, and those will be put into an agreement for your approval at a later date. We have asked, and the developers agreed, to obtain a financial feasibility analysis for the development project. What that is, it's an outside review that basically tells us if our financial assumptions are realistic and firm. And that's real important. You need to have that confidence when you enter into a project. And so that's part of the process that it's not statutorily required, but something that we asked for that the developers agreed to. Again, later then, you'll be looking at the redevelopment project plan, and that will involve a process with Planning Commission review, and the Planning Commission will establish findings related to that redevelopment plan and that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. Obviously, that's very important. Later after that, there will be a resolution of the city's intent to adopt the redevelopment project plan, then a public hearing, and then the action to adopt the redevelopment project plan by ordinance. And so there are multiple items, as you can see, starting today that would happen in the next 110 to 120 days related to this. There are multiple notices. Statutorily, we're only required to provide notice to Saline County and USD 305, but we believe the other taxing entities are just as important to our community, and so we certainly would provide the same level of notice to all those entities. We think that's very important. I'll talk a little bit about regional retail competitiveness, but I won't get into a great deal of it. Salina has a pretty strong market, and we have had a pretty strong market and a stable market over the past few years. And no one can argue otherwise because our pull factor is pretty strong, and it shows that. It's the fourth highest in the state. However, we have had sites, many of which development sites along South 9th, well, there are really about 4 or 5 of them that have not developed in the last, say, 10 years. They've been out there. This is one of them. There are a couple that are real similar to this site along South 9th. There's land that's available near the Lowe's store that was built a few years ago, and we haven't had a lot of interest in those. So when you look at the use of an incentive, when you should and shouldn't apply that, you do have to look at your local market. And is our market a large, high-demand market? Is it a middle market? Is it a low market? Well, for our size of community, we think it's a pretty strong market, but when you compare to other urbanized areas in which you have to compete for some of these named stores that the folks in town want to have, we're probably somewhere in the middle, and we're not considered on the high end. And as a matter of fact, even in this project, this is not the largest store that Kohl's builds. And so we're really a middle market, and we have to, as much as we'd like to brag about our market, we are a middle market, and we have to be cognizant of that. And you combine that with the challenge of this particular site in the floodplain, and it makes it a little bit difficult to develop. Salina's new Economic Development Strategic Plan that was endorsed by all the taxing entities not too many months ago, it basically anticipates this type of project and the need to be more aggressive in order to be more competitive. And basically what it says is it anticipates the use of tax increment financing districts as well as other incentives, but there are really 2 main outcomes that it expects if those tools are used. One is that we would reduce leakage of retail dollars outside of our economy. In other words, folks that may choose to drive outside of Salina to shop, hopefully we keep them here. The second thing is to actually pull dollars from outside of our economy into our economy. So hopefully we broaden our reach and we bring folks that normally may drive somewhere else to shop, and we bring them here to shop. We think that Kohl's would do that. It's considered either the top or the second most sought-after retail store out there, and we know from a local survey that it's one that's really kind of popped up in Salina as being an attractive site and type of development for our community. With that, I will also say that attached to your report is an analysis of retail development opportunity in Salina that was prepared by the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm not going to get into that in a great deal. It'd take me quite a bit longer, and you've had a chance to look at that. I will also say that Dennis Lawver, the President and CEO of the Chamber, is here, and if you have any questions at all about that, I'm sure he'd be happy to address those questions. We also have Christian Ablaw with Classic Real Estate here, representing the developer of the project, and certainly I'm sure he would answer any questions that you might have for this project. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and certainly those others in attendance would as well.
The land off the State Street exit, John, remember, is that floodplain or floodway?
I'm going to defer that to Dean.
State Street.
Referring to State Street and I-135?
Yeah.
It is both. There's some floodway in there, but it's predominantly 100-year floodplain. But there is some floodway.
Okay.
See, on the Chamber's summary, well, there's not page numbers, but on the page that's headed Analysis of Retail Development Opportunity in Salina, there's a paragraph that says the public will accept responsibility for storm sewer work associated with the drainage capacity of the site and the immediate retail area north and south of the site. So does that mean public share of improvements above and beyond the $3 million of infrastructure that's included in this?
No, Commissioner, I think what that's intended to do is to emphasize one of the areas of cost related to this particular site that would fall into that $3 million as justification.
Okay.
With regard to tax increment financing, do we have any sort of master plan for how we want to use that in the future?
Commissioner, that's a good question. I think the first step was the new economic development strategic plan that we talked about. But as we get into our comprehensive planning process for the city that's under contract today, one of the things we talked about when we looked at sub-plans or functional areas we wanted to address was economic development. And my hope is out of that what will come out of that are certain areas of our community in which we believe that we can communicate publicly that we believe additional incentives are needed or would be needed in order to develop or redevelop those areas. So I believe that's going to be our tool that actually kind of sets forth our plan for the future and how we might apply this. This site was fairly easy to look at just simply because of the floodplain nature and the impact that created for the site.
I know it's a little early on details of the site plan, but the site plan does apparently show a road or driveway that goes north to south from between the Capitol Federal Building and the Ashley Building down to connect to the building that goes in, or the road that goes in front of Office Max. Is that a public road in front of Office Max or a public road on this site? I'm just wondering if any of the infrastructure we're talking about building eventually becomes public infrastructure or if it's all private infrastructure when it's completed.
Yeah, Commissioner, there's a road from the south end of the site that I think you're referring to that would come up. That would be a public road. They're finalizing the road. There's a thought as to connection to the north, but quite honestly, we don't know if that's going to happen, and it's not necessary to develop the site. So what you would probably see is a connection from the south. It's a continuation of a public street that would go north and then would come back to the 9th Street, to a 9th Street intersection.
Okay.
Whether or not that goes further north is yet to be seen. There has to be some discussion.
But that public street then is also part of the $3.3 million.
Yeah, it would be qualifying. What you'll find is there's going to be much more in qualifying eligible costs than the $3 million would actually cover. So the $3 million isn't covering all the site development costs. There are quite a few. The developer may be able to explain a little more, but there's a lot more in cost that'll have to be covered outside of that by the developer.
In previous public input in this neighborhood, this is a portion of South 9th Street frontage that has already been improved with sales tax funds. Again, how much did we spend on that phase? 3.6 million, something like that?
I can't recall the actual number, but you're correct. What I call the improved South 9th Street does run across the frontage of this property.
Okay. That was special sales tax money.
Any additional questions from staff at the moment? Seeing none at the moment, I'd like to open up for any public comment.
I have a real simple, quick one. Gary Schwarzenegger, 528 South College. The $3 million tax abatement, I'll ask the questions that I know I can't respond question and answer with you or staff. Would go to whom? Would it be to Kohl's or would it be to the developer? And the other question is, my understanding that some other communities this size have not found it necessary to offer a tax abatement. I would be interested to know if there was any particular reason we should offer it, other communities not. As I understand, about half of the communities into which Kohl's goes receives the tax abatement, half do not. We're still pretty close to Halloween. I can't say that it's a bad idea for Kohl's or the developer to come to the front door with a trick-or-treat bag, hands outstretched. $3 million would be nice, be a good treat.
Thank you. I want to translate part of that comment into a question. Would that be fair to characterize this as an abatement?
No. No, actually, it's not. The taxes will be generated. They will be collected. What happens is there's, again, statutorily, there's a list of those expenditures that qualify for reimbursement from these funds. And in this particular case, the developer's taken on the responsibility to actually develop the site, to put the improvements into the site. And so there would be a formal transaction that would be approved by all parties as to where those funds go and what those funds are paying for, but they would be guaranteed to be going towards those site improvements that are related or that are eligible under state statute. So it's not an abatement at all. It's just a redirecting of funds that we would not otherwise have if this site didn't develop into the site, so that we could have this development here. And I'd be happy to comment a little bit too on the other communities. Quite honestly, there's we got to read a little bit in Sunday's newspaper about other communities, but there were some things. For example, Garden City has utilized an incentive. I don't know that it was a TIF, but an incentive for Home Depot development. That wasn't included in that article. They felt it was necessary to become a retail destination for that portion of the state. So I believe they had very good reason to look at that. One of the primary factors is what is your local economy and how strong a market are you? If we're a suburb, such as Derby that was mentioned, we expect a lot of development, a lot of residential development, a much faster pace than what Salina would see. You're going to create a separate demand that we may not have as a community that's 75 miles or so from a metropolitan area. So you're going to be in a totally, it's not an apples to apples comparison with that. I don't know that we have the same type of demand, and that's why you would see down there a larger store that's been built than even what's being recommended here. So there are differences in communities and there are differences in markets. There are also differences in sites, and there's some other things that you don't always read about, which is the role of the developer, how long the developer has maybe had property, and possibly agreements between the developer and the governments, and what's happened there versus just with, say, Kohl's in the government. So there's a lot of different factors that need to go into this. And I think if anything, we've staffed this through and through as much as we possibly could, any issue. And we really do believe when we put in here that it's a but-for, that would not happen but for this incentive. We truly believe that. And the reason is again, you look at the site and the fact that we have this site and two others that are very, very similar, and we have not had any interest, not serious interest, for at least 10 or 12 years. And well, since the sites were there, where other sites have developed around them. So we feel that in order to be competitive in today's competitive market and provide the types of stores that our community is asking for, it's time to take a step forward.
So is it staff's thinking that the floodplain issue is the key factor and that's hindered development?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the only factor, but it definitely is a key factor.
Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Mayor, on the first one, I move that we adopt resolution number 076446, establishing the site as an eligible area for redevelopment district incentives.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to adopt resolution 07-6446, establishing that the site is an eligible area for redevelopment district incentives in accordance with Kansas State Law 12-7-1771A, due to a majority of its area being located within the 100-year floodplain. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Mayor, I'd move for adoption of resolution number 076447, providing notice of an upcoming public hearing in order for the governing body to consider findings necessary to establish the redevelopment district.
Second.
Motion is to approve resolution 07-6447. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed,
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Mayor, I'd move for adoption of Resolution 076448, authorizing the city manager to enter into a funding agreement with Classic Real Estate for cost reimbursement of related legal, financial, and planning consulting services.
Second.
Motion is to approve Resolution 07-6448, authorizing the city manager to enter into a funding agreement with Classic Real Estate to reimburse the city for costs associated with the use of legal, financial, and planning consulting services necessary for review and implementation of the development project. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
And Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution number 076449, authorizing the city manager to engage Gilmore and Bell as special legal counsel for this project.
Second.
The motion is to approve Resolution 07-6449, retaining Gilmore and Bell for special legal services. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That likewise passes 5-0. Any other business?
Just one thing, Mayor, if we could, I'd like to introduce a new addition to our staff, our Director of Community and Development, Gary Hobby. There he is back there. So
Welcome.
we're good, glad to have him on board and excited for his contribution and where we're going to be able to go with him. So,
Super. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
One other reminder for the general public, we are soliciting folks to volunteer to serve on the Comprehensive Planning Citizen Input Committee, so get your expressions of interest in soon. What are we talking about, cutting that off the 14th?
16th.
November 16th?
November 16th.
Is that expression of interest on the city's website now?
Yes, it is. It's on the website. It's been in the paper as well as other media, and I've actually been receiving some calls.
Super.
Move for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Well, that was agonizing over there.